self-care for SEA, and so it's great to bring this topic back up through the distance learning playbook, and I appreciate you, Andrew, for letting us do this today. So first off, we're going to talk about self-care through two lenses. The first lens is really that personal lens. How do we take care of ourselves? But also we have a professional lens to look through as well. And self-care offers this different opportunity that typically doesn't happen with our work, where we can actually become practitioners while we are facilitating it. So I highly encourage you, if you don't already have a self-care practice, to think about what can you do from today's discussion to move forward with a practice. If you already have one, what new ideas do you want to add to your toolbox? So first, we're going to just do a quick check-in. I know Andrew did one at the beginning, but this is to kind of model something that we can do with teachers, that they can do with students as well. So I'm going to have you use the chat, and I'm going to show you a couple of statements. And for each statement, I want you to rate it. So a 1, never, up to a 5, yes, pretty much always. So the first one is, I feel exhausted. So just have to put a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I gotta find my chat. It's hiding behind your pictures. Okay, 2s and 3s, a little bit. Okay, I got a couple 4s in there. A 1, never. Oh, Lisa, tell me what you're doing. Okay, I feel like my responsibilities keep piling on. Okay, 3s and 4s, a couple 1s. I talk to someone who helps me feel better when I am stressed. Good, I see lots of 4s and 5s on this one. And then the last one, I encounter experiences that require me to practice being flexible. I saw lots of 5s right away. There was no, this year has definitely shown us that flexibility is a positive character trait that a lot of us have. Might have been tested a lot, but we have it. So again, those are just nice to have things that we can incorporate into our work. Just doing check-ins, it builds awareness and allows people just to kind of get out of the education mind and into kind of the just thinking about themselves. All right. So now we have to talk about not just what self-care is, but we need to talk about the why, because that I think becomes really important. When we talk to teachers about self-care, I often see, I get like eye rolls and I don't need that fluffy stuff. But if we really dig down into education and the challenges that we face in education, a lot of challenges can cause some emotional, physical, and cognitive issues for us if left unchecked. So a few of these are decision fatigue, compassion fatigue, traumatic stress, and burnout. So decision fatigue really just is looking at all of the decisions we make. As educators can make over 1,000 educational decisions every day, and that doesn't include just the decisions about work. That includes, family, personal decisions. We make tons of decisions every day, and so the more decisions we make, the worse our decisions usually get. So if you think about it, like if you've ever gotten to that place at supper time, like I can't even think about supper right now. You're tapped out. My husband usually knows this is happening when I answer everything with I don't know or I don't care. He's like, oh, you had one of those days. Okay, so you're not going to answer any questions. I'm like, probably not. So decision fatigue, it impacts us by reducing our ability to distinguish between good or bad choices, or like what I told in my example with my husband, it causes us to just avoid them completely, or it reduces our willpower. So you shouldn't eat that entire container of ice cream. You just can't stop yourself. It tastes too good. these things happen to us, and these are normal everyday occurrences for our educators, especially right now. The amount of decisions they're having to make is double what they're used to. Another problem that plagues teachers is compassion fatigue. And this one, it's a broad topic. It really is, it can include emotional, physical, or spiritual distress. And it really is associated with caregivers because caregivers work in situations where they're constantly being asked to show compassion for others. And it's not unusual to see some of the best teachers that you know fall victim to compassion fatigue. Along with compassion fatigue, we have something called secondary traumatic stress. So this is an emotional disorder that arises when somebody vicariously experiences the traumatic experiences of someone else. So we actually can have some of the same symptoms of PTSD because of somebody else's experiences, because we take those on, because of, again, compassion fatigue. We're very caring people. And that doesn't include the traumatic stress. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most all of us right now from the last 6 months have experienced traumatic stress in some form. Traumatic stress is just simply a shocking event, or it comes from a traumatic event that overwhelms us emotionally, or it takes away our ability to cope. And this can shatter our sense of security. This can leave us feeling helpless, vulnerable, unsafe. Really, a lot of the things that we've dealt with through this whole pandemic. Different spectrum. Again, it doesn't mean that it puts you out for days. It just means I still remember the day that the governor shut down schools through May. That was a traumatic day for me. It took me a couple of days to bounce back from that day. And I'm sure you can all think of days throughout this whole pandemic that have impacted you pretty negatively. And the last one, which I think traumatic stress is kind of scary, but burnout is even scarier to me, because burnout simply means that passion for education is gone. Think of the flame for our candle is fully burnt out. Our flame is gone. And we see this in people that they seem completely exhausted, very negative towards their jobs, or they're just not they don't produce or aren't as effective in their jobs as well. And so this is the one we want to try to stay away from. So that's one of the couple of reasons why we want to talk about self-care with teachers and ourselves, but also we have just the phases of the first year of teaching. This is the phase of the first year of teaching, but all of our teachers go through phases throughout the year. And these include the disillusionment phase. So this phase, while it's more predominant in new teachers, it happens to all teachers, usually starts around October and lasts till about the middle of winter break. And it's kind of a way of saying, like, this honeymoon phase is over. And I think the teachers got a really great honeymoon phase this year. And then when it stopped, it hit hard. They started, like, teachers might be feeling really overburdened and overworked at this time, can't quite keep up with their work. And then, of course, students are going through this too. They're going through their own disillusionment phase. So we're seeing teachers complaining about students not behaving as well as they did before, or they're breaking the rules, or they're falling behind in their work. They might be not coming to school as much. And this also, you might even see it with your family saying, hey, why aren't they at home? You're spending so much time in school. So the important part is that we need to teach teachers that this phase of the year happens. It's normal, but we can do things to make it so that it's not so harsh, so it doesn't hit us as hard. And then, of course, so this is a normal year. We don't have a normal year, right? We're in a pandemic, so we have the phases of disaster. And they are really, the experts in mental health are really encouraging us to think about these phases and in regards to our mental health. So Dr. Kiera Mouseth, she's from a clinical psychologist from Seattle, says that we really for the phases, we hit the impact stage about mid-March. And then we hit the heroic stage about April, May. We were all doing our best. We were staying home. We were finding different ways or brands of toilet paper when we couldn't find toilet paper. We were doing what we needed to do. And then you guys all remember June. June was kind of this lovely time where things almost felt good, almost felt like it was getting better. And then we hit July, August, September, October, and things just, we're really getting into that disillusionment phase again. So this is similar to the phases of teaching, because now you'll see many people many people will feel hopeless, or it feels like this is never going to end. I mean, I remember a time when I used to think this is going to end soon, and nope, it's going to be, we're looking at over a year probably before we're really going to be out of this. And then we have Fisher, Fry, and Hattie from the Distance Learning Playbook are actually calling this crisis teaching right now. So when we talk to teachers about, if you get the opportunity to get in with work with teachers, really talking about that self-care is really important right now. So what is self-care? I know I've talked with many of you about it before when we had our SDA training, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. It's just this simple activities that we do to intentionally take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. It's really easy to overlook, but it's something that's very simple to do and has tons of benefits. There are different types of self-care. There's macro self-care, which are like those big one-time things that we do. Like my favorite thing to do is go get a massage. If I could make enough money, I would go get a massage every single week, but I can't. But it helps me when I really need it. For some, going on vacation could be a macro self-care. I'm a mom, so it's not self-care yet. I'm hoping in the future it will be. Joining a gym or meeting with a financial advisor, or even going to your doctor, doing those regular checkups can be macro self-care. But really what we're going to dig into today is that micro self-care. So micro self-care are these little daily things that we can do every day to help refill us, help us build and maintain our resilience. And resilience is just our ability to weather the storm. So as things get difficult, that we're able to rebound. I like to think of it as a glass of water. Everybody has a full glass of water, different, and you might have different sizes of glasses of water. But every time we come up with something too difficult, we take a drink, and it helps calm us down. It helps us know that we can get through it. But if we don't keep filling that glass up, it gets fully depleted, and then next time a difficult situation comes up, and it's harder to bounce back from. So really with self-care, we want to talk about what does it mean to be able to bounce back, to come back from it. And self-care helps us build our resilience. So we're going to dig into different types of self-care, and here in a little bit, we're going to put you into breakout groups because we want you to talk about what do you already do? What are some things that you do for self-care? And what I love about self-care, and it's probably my favorite piece of it, is that it's subjective. It is what works for you. We'll talk about things that work for us today, but really what works for you. And it can be a simple mindset change. It can be something that you already do. But if you look at it as self-care, it can actually help you when you need it the most. So we're going to dig into emotional, cognitive, social, and spiritual today. But physical, financial, and environmental are still important types of self-care. So physical is actually probably the most important. It impacts everything else that we do. It impacts your emotions. It impacts our cognitive abilities. It impacts how we get along with each other. So physical self-care is really important. And this is eating healthy, not about dieting. It's not about losing weight. It's about eating a healthy, balanced diet, getting enough sleep. I know not everybody's exhausted here, but some of you are pretty tired. So getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, that is so important. And exercise, regular physical exercise that you will do. Like I love the idea of running, but I'm probably not going to do it. So I'm going to find some other ways of exercising that will really help me want to do them. Financial self-care doesn't seem like it would be self-care, but if you think about divorce rates and what breaks up marriages, many times it's finances. So it does cause stress on ourselves and on our relationships with others. And so just doing little things to make sure you feel financially sound can help. And then environmental. So environmental can mean helping take care of the environment, but it also can mean just taking care of your own personal environment. I'm glad Andrew gave me the virtual background because my office is not environmentally okay right now. I need to clean it up. But that's where like the mindset of like I had to I hate cleaning at home, but when I started thinking of it as not about others viewing my cleaning and how well I take care of my house, but me feeling comfortable in my environment. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I just need to feel comfortable in it. And so that has really helped me when it comes to that environmental self-care piece. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes, about 5 minutes now. Want you to you're going to be put into groups and just talk about, what do you do for self-care? What works for you? What would you like to try? Any of those topics. So now we're going to break into looking at some of the types of self-care a little bit more. And Julie and Otis are going to share some of their experiences or their ideas with all of you in regards to some of the other types of self-care.
So this is my cue. So I'm gonna talk to you about one of the strategies that I use daily, and it's called Choose Again, and it comes from Abram Hicks, and you can find it in that link there, that Ask and It Is Given book, but it's the emotional guidance scale. And I think some of you have heard when Andrew launched his podcast, he and I did a podcast on self-care where I kind of talked about my story and some of the strategies that I use, and this was one of them that I talked about in the podcast. So it might sound familiar, but essentially the story, the short version of it is we were going through a period of about a year where we had some major impacts in our family. We had been to 5 funerals of people our age. We had 2 major family events that were very traumatic. And my husband was diagnosed with MS, and it left me at one point swallowing ibuprofen and just trying not to let people down. And I was burnt, angry, exhausted, and eventually short one eyebrow. And that was the day when I looked in my mirror getting ready for work and realized my left eyebrow was falling out, that I thought, I have to just do better. I have to get serious about this self-care business and take care of me first so I can take care of all the other people in my family. So that kind of began my journey. And I had the huge advantage of the training from Theresa and the gals from ESUCC, Dallas and Susan, to sort of dig into and work on some content to help myself. So this was one of the strategies that I really kind of landed on that works for me, and it's called Choose Again. So this emotional guidance scale points out to us that we really have 22 emotions, and really most people think about 4 pretty generally: happy, sad, mad, depressed, right? Like we know those pretty well. So what was a learning for me was we have a lot of emotions, and they're described here. And I think whether you're having personal issues or you're going through, learning how to teach in a pandemic, we all landed at 22: fear, grief, depression, despair, and powerlessness. And that's like the bottom rung of any emotion you can feel, right? And so for me, it was, okay, deciding that I'm feeling an emotion and naming it. And then the strategy is choose again. So you try to choose one up from wherever you're at. So for a while during the loss of my eyebrow, I just decided to be jealous. I'm going to be jealous of the people who are not dealing with chronic illness. They're not dealing with burying friends. They're just not dealing with the sadness that I have. And so you're saying, well, jealous isn't a good place to be, right? Well, the strategy works like this. Jealous is better than powerlessness. So you choose jealousy till you can sit in that for a while till you can choose something higher. So I chose discouragement for a while. And eventually I could choose, I'm just overwhelmed with all of this. And eventually you try to get yourself up into the top 7 of that chart. Or you can say, I'm content with what's happening. I'm getting hopeful about remote pandemic learning. I'm learning, I have some optimism that I can do this and be okay at it or be good at it. So the strategy doesn't really put any judgment about any of these emotions. It just says you have to choose one above where you're at and sit in that one till you can move up, trying to get yourself into the top 7 of the scale. So I have that little chart hanging right over here on my bulletin board, and I look at it every single day. It's also a chart that I've used with my own personal children to just be able to name emotions and just be able to work through them and say, okay, I get it that you're angry and you want to have revenge, and you are perfectly welcome to feel that for a while. And then you need to choose again. I have a really good friend who tells me, That's great, Julie, but you can't unpack and live there. And so that's what I'm always telling myself as I'm trying to move through this chart. So that's a strategy that I use every day. Teresa?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I love, like, the name it to tame it. Emotions are this it's really important that we name what we're feeling, because it allows us to figure out why. And then again, like you said, I love that you can't live there, move on. So now we're going to look at cognitive self-care, and I think this is Otis.
Yeah, one thing I do, this piece is something that's not only cognitive, but I think it fits in a bunch of the other categories as well. And one of the things I do and have been looking for is finding a way to keep myself organized, kind of the to-do lists, planners, journals type things. And this is one that's kind of all rolled into one, and is developed after the monastic lifestyle. And it's called the Monk Manual. And there are really 3 parts to this. And the book is about 90 days. And that's an actual picture of the Monk Manual that I've been using almost a year now, and really gotten myself into it. But the 3 parts are, Theresa, if you'll go to the next one, there is a monthly section to this, where not only you can plan for the month, but then you have a habit that you try and do for the entire month. The first month I did this last January, it was, I want to find 3 things that I'm grateful for each day, and I cannot repeat for the entire month of January, which that is really, really tough to not repeat what you're grateful for about 30 days. So it really makes you really think and get into some of that piece. But then also kind of, what does your month look like, and what are your priorities? Then on the next page, over on the other side of that page, oh, back one more, yep. There's a theme. So you kind of pick a theme for the month. Mine has been gratitude. This month it's being thankful. Last month was kind of a refocus. So you can kind of pick some of those pieces. And then you give yourself a monthly check-in with a thumbs up, thumbs down on 6 different areas. Your physical, your spiritual, your relationships, your play. Are you getting out there and doing some of that play piece with it? Also kind of looking at what's a change that you can make that month, kind of like Julie talked in hers. Well, I'm feeling this. What's the change that I can make to help me go up the rung on that emotional scale? And then what's a question you want answered that month? And then at the end of the month, you reflect on the month. What were your biggest accomplishments? What were some of the relationships you're grateful for? And what's the greatest insight you've gained? Kind of goes to the love and learn that Andrew's doing on the Fridays as well. The second part, go ahead and go to the next one, Theresa, is a weekly. So you kind of have, what are your priorities for the week? What is your to-do list for those priorities for the week? What are some personal goals, personal growth that you want for the week? Also, what is some relationship growth, whether that's a personal relationship or a work relationship or whatever it is? And then what are you looking forward to? It kind of gets you preparing for the week. What are you looking forward to that week? Then you get to reflect on your week, but you also have a habit tracker. Did you complete your habit each day? What were your biggest accomplishments? What are some insights on your habit? You know, did you really do some things or not? Also, what, I got to remember, meaningful moments. What were some of those meaningful moments that you had during the week that you can remember? What is God teaching you? If that's what you so believe. And then one way I can improve next week. And then the third part of this is the daily. So you also have what are your priorities for the day? What is your to-do list for the day? What are you grateful for? What are you looking forward to? Plus you can put out your time, and you have a reminder for your habit and theme. What are some ways that I can give? I want to pay it forward. I want to be present. I want to be able to do this for somebody. And then also looking back and reflecting. What are the highlights? When were you at your best? And this is always kind of the hardest for me, figuring out when was I at my best during the day? But also, when did I really feel uncomfortable? When did I feel that unrest during the day? Did I not feel quite right? And then one way I can improve tomorrow. And each of those parts also has some dot paper to it. I see Samantha put the link in there, and I also have the link on the next one, monkmanual.com. There's also Facebook pages and groups for this. It's about $40 for the 90 days to do this, but the more you purchase, the cheaper it gets for you as well. And if you're around me sometime, I have it always with me. I have it here in my office. I can even show you at some time kind of a filled, it's kind of hard to see with that on there, a filled out page, what it looks like, how I was trying to refocus and everything. But it's just for that 90 days. It's nice. It's bound. I'm going to be continuing on into the next year as well. It's something that I found that's helped keep me a lot more organized and focused on things, but also like the monthly one. What am I doing for play? What am I doing for my relationships? And it really gets you reflecting. As we know, reflection helps us become better as well. So I really like it in that respect also.
Yeah, and I think I love this format. It does bring a lot of those things together, Otis, you're right. And I think when we talk about cognitive self-care, it's just about getting our minds into a different place. We are, we're lucky enough to work in an area where we get to use our minds a lot and be very creative, but sometimes we hit walls, and sometimes we can't, like I talked about the decision fatigue, sometimes we can't think anymore. So even just focusing on something else that still makes our mind work because it wants to, helps us so we can come back and be better educators later. So thank you, Otis.
Yeah. And on my priorities, 2 of them are usually work priorities, and the third is usually a personal priority for me, is the way that it's been going through. That way you keep that personal side there too, and can try and find that separation between work and home.
And Otis, you've been using this for almost a year now. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
All right, so the next one is social self-care. So this is how interacting with others and getting out and being with people when we can.
So this is another strategy that I engage with every day on a couple different levels. I was sort of a latecomer to Brene Brown and some of her work. I know lots of you have read her work. She came into my reading list thanks to our very own Rhonda Gindra. And when I was Kelly, when I was the chair of strategists, Rhonda sent me the most beautiful thank you note, and we all know she writes beautiful thank you notes. And she suggested some of the books by Brene Brown, which I read, and then a couple years later found very important in my life. So this is a strategy called Find Your Squad. And the way Brene describes it is you literally get out a sticky note that's like 1 inch by 1 inch, like literally this big. And you can sure do this along with me as I'm describing it, but on this sticky note, you write down the very short list, and it should be a short list, of people who love you enough to give you the right feedback when you're in a mess and need support. So I have a couple square squads. I kind of have a work squad. I kind of have a college friend social squad. Some key people on my squad are my husband, because there's oftentimes we have to communicate about the children we're raising and the bills we're paying and the life we're living. There's a principal friend of mine on my square squad who I call my living in the truth when I just need to hear the brutal, honest truth of the matter. She's the one that I call. That great good friend of mine that says you can't live there, Julie. You got to unpack. You can't unpack and stay. You got to keep moving and keep growing. So those are the people that are on my squad. And I do have a couple of squads, but we need to find those people. And the second step of it is not just naming them for yourself, but naming that for them, going to them and saying, the feedback I need from you is the sentences that help me not unpack and live here, but the sentences that help me move on. And I know you love me enough to see me in this struggle and still hold me to greatness and dust this off with me and get me to where I need to go. So I hope that you have a square squad. I hope that you have a few. There is a link there if you want to go to the Brene Brown, I'll put it in the chat, the Brene Brown lesson plan for teaching this. You can teach this with kids, teach it to your own kids, teach it to your family, but it's just a good strategy that says, find your people that can give you the feedback to keep you healthy. So I hope you've written a few names on your sticky note, and don't forget step 2, which is let those people know that they're on your Square Squad and the kind of feedback that you need from them. Theresa? Oh, Otis.
Yeah, mine is also my family as well. These are not your typical first day of school pictures in the top left-hand corner with the masks on, but my wife and son are really helpful with this. I was having a tough time with some stuff this spring, and my wife's like, just take a break and then go back to it. And sometimes that's what it is. I love the one up in the top right-hand corner. That unfortunately, that was the Ohio State game last year where we got smoked. However, it was Callan's first Husker football game in person. So that's what made that even more special. And then our red burns brighter. And that part of that was just really, really cool. And then being able to go to Wyoming in the lower left-hand corner and Callan being able to do Christmas cookies with my parents back in Wyoming. Lower right-hand corner is my sister's boys after a basketball game when we were back for Christmas this last year. So the 3 cousins together there. And Grant, who's on the left, and Callan, we're a little closer. I think Grant's grown a little bit. Callan has too, so we haven't seen them together. And then, of course, my wife. I don't know how I could get through some things with my wife. We've had some great adventures. Yes, that is a slot machine in the Vegas airport on the way to Napa Valley for a workcation. So, get to have those fun times and travel with those pieces, which I'll talk about traveling later. Unfortunately, I don't have any of my in-laws, pictures of my in-laws, but they are also awesome as well. My mother-in-law and father-in-law live out in Thedford, just outside of Thedford. I have a little bit of acreage there. So just getting out in the sandhills, especially when there's rain and it's green. The sandhills are pretty when it's green. Unfortunately, you don't see that too often. So just getting out there in those mornings, and they look right over the Loop River. Their front deck's right over the Loop River. So sometimes in this early summer, being able just to look over the Loop River at their house is kind of cool as well. So yes, my dad and I have the same haircut, Samantha. And if I had hair, we would have the same bowl going, even though it's comes from your mother's side. I still have a little bit of that as well. So.
All right, thank you. And so the last one we're going to talk about is that spiritual self-care. This is something that I think we often in education feel that we can't talk about spirituality, and when we talk about spirituality, it doesn't necessarily mean religion, but it can. This is about our connection to the world at large, to being part of something bigger than we are. One way that I practice spiritual self-care is through mindfulness. I have been practicing for about 3 years, and I have found a lot of calm and connection with others and many other benefits through my mindfulness practice. But that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. And so when we talk about spiritual self-care, again, this is about what works best for you.
One of mine is travel, whether it's for work or with family as well. This is actually just over a year ago in Palm Springs. I went out to a conference out in Palm Springs, and it's about sunset there, looking back at the mountains out in Palm Springs. So just going out, being able to walk around and be in those places that are not only conferences, which kind of gets into a little bit of the getting together with people, but also just going travel and seeing new places or visiting places that I hadn't visited in a long time as well. Also for spiritual self-care, Theresa, if you want to go to the next one, I do have a therapist, and just go ahead and click through several times here, Theresa. My therapist is a golf course, any golf course, anywhere. The 3 pictures of the actual golfing was actually this summer. Thankfully, my son loves to golf too, which is very nice. So that forces me to get out as well. And then I've kept track of the golf courses I've played, a lot in Wyoming and Nebraska. That's where I'm originally from. But yes, I do have one down in Galveston, Texas. I have one up in Montana, Idaho, and a couple up in Canada as well. So I know Derek was talking about golfing as well earlier in our breakout, and I love to golf. I was the golf coach at Sutherland for 13 years. So, it's kind of nice to be able to go out and do that as well, to do some of those things. So people know when I say I'm going to visit my therapist, I'm going to a golf course someplace in the area. And then the next one, I actually have quite a few on this one, is really spiritual for me, is a lot of prayer. Whether it's the rosary or the Divine Mercy, I have a couple of a singing rosary and a singing divine chaplet on my phone. It ended this last week, but the previous 75 days, my wife and I were doing a little program, and every morning during the week at 5 o'clock, I would get up and go out and walk. And I would listen to the Divine Mercy chaplet singing as I was walking for my half hour in the morning, and then do a rosary prayer. But I also love Gregorian chant. So I have a couple Gregorian chants that I listen to. I'll even listen to those when I have my hour of adoration or a church. So that really is, on the spiritual side for me, helps me a lot with things, just to kind of hopefully shut my mind off. Because as we know, as educators, we'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and we can't get back to sleep because our minds are going, oh, I got this. Oh, this would be a great idea for this presentation. Oh, this would be a great idea for this presentation. So this really helps me to try and shut my mind off.
Okay, so we're gonna go into breakout rooms again, and we're gonna give you about 10 minutes here. And before we do that, though, I want to show you one more resource, and I'll get it into the chat as well. Actually, Andrew, can you do that? Can you put the building self-care slide deck into the chat? It's this one, the self-care examples. So what I'd like you to do is think about self-care and what you do and what categories would it fit in. So this is a slide deck, and it should be editable. When you get in here, you can start adding ideas. You can look through the ideas that are on there, but you can also start adding more ideas to it, so that we have this one collection that you can come back to whenever you may need it, or whenever, and you're welcome to use it and make a copy and use it with teachers as well. We also want you to be thinking about how are you going to incorporate self-care into your work? What are some strategies that you can do to help with your work with other educators? Okay, does that sound about right, Andrew? Okay, all right, go ahead and put us in a breakout. So you have now this slide deck. You're welcome to make a copy of it, use it with any of your work with teachers. At the bottom, there's a self-care checklist that it'll force you to make of a sheet, a Google sheet. And this is really just a way to, like, if we've given this assignment, Susan and I have a monthly class, and this is our class's assignment this month, is that they have to do a couple of these self-care checklists each week. Just see how it goes, set some goals, nothing too outlandish, just because we want, we want to be able to do it and not give up too soon. Okay, go ahead to the next one. So just some articles. I looked through the articles that I used to help reference some of the things from today, including, I do have to shout out to Sarah Essay, my colleague from Teaching and Learning. She did do some of this, created some of the slides that I then stole from her. So thank you, Sarah. But there are there's several books in our ESUCC library. 10% Happier. If you don't know much about mindfulness but are interested, this is a wonderful book on getting you acquainted with mindfulness. And Daring Greatly, Julie talked about Brene Brown earlier. She's a wonderful author, and so Daring Greatly is in there, and I think a couple other books of hers as well. Okay, next slide. And then any further this is just further opportunities. If you're interested in learning more about mindfulness, Mindful Schools, which I would highly suggest as a resource, they're providing an online course for only $65 right now. It's very cheap compared to what it usually is. There's also a free online course for mindfulness-based stress reduction. Permission to Feel is probably one of my favorite books right now. And the author did a webinar for Castle, and there's the recording there. Following Julie Downing. I was just gonna say follow Julie Downing, but you can do that too. But follow Tina Bogren on Facebook. She has a Self-Care for Educators thing on Facebook. And then I have a whole a sheet full of mindfulness apps and resources that I update and add to over time. So there are the resources.
Awesome. I have a couple kind of talking points, and certainly thanks to everybody, and that comes up in the slide here later too. We had to previously reschedule the teacher clarity session, and it's actually been moved to a week from this upcoming Friday. Really looking forward to that one, as I know that both Michelle Kessler and Eileen Barks have spent a lot of time putting that together and been thinking about that. And I think that's just so important right now as well. And so anticipate that. And then actually the very next school day, that following Monday, we'll have another lunch bunch. So instead of it being every other week, we'll have one each of the next 2 weeks. So that's pretty terrific. As was referenced earlier, we've been doing a lot of different things with communication. So Julie Downing has been on the podcast and shared about mindfulness. We continue to communicate through that avenue. Look for this week's to come out probably tomorrow on a pretty big initiative that NERCSA and the ESUCC are doing in the collaboration with remote learning. And it gives kind of the backstory of what you can anticipate with a resource that's going to be shared from there. We did start a Facebook group as a way to give us an avenues to kind of have more informal and ongoing conversations. You could check that out. And every Friday we've been doing a Love and Learn, which Theresa was on last week, which is awesome. Otis actually did a Halloween version with us where we all dressed up in costume earlier. Julie will be on this upcoming Friday. And it has been such just like a breath of fresh air at 4 p.m. after a long week for us to hop online and just talk about something that we absolutely loved and something that we learned. It's a little bit of that mindfulness piece and having some reflection built into your week. And so,
and having a laugh.
Yes.
Yeah, just go back and watch ours. I won't.
You should. It was pretty fun. And we even brought in some outside, like, Andy McNair was on ours this past week. So I reached out to her, and she works at ESU in Texas. And so I was like, why not? Right. This is an ESU thing. So she jumped in and we had a lot of fun there. So thank you to our presenters today. Thanks for everybody for spending your lunch with us. And we really look forward to seeing you a week from Friday again for another edition of the Lunch Bunch. So see you next time.